I confessed my feelings to my best friend after 2 years of climbing together, and she crushed me with the kindest rejection I've ever received. Sometimes the most devastating moments come wrapped in gentle understanding, delivered with such care that you can't even properly hate the person destroying your hopes. For 2 years, Amber and I had conquered Colorado's most challenging routes together, from the technical limestone faces of El Dorado Canyon to the towering granite walls of Rocky Mountain National Park. Every Wednesday evening and Saturday morning found us at our usual spots, her infectious laugh echoing off red sandstone as we belayed each other through increasingly difficult climbs, pushing each other to attempt routes that seemed impossible just months before. I'd fallen for her somewhere between our first successful ascent of the Diamond on Long's Peak and watching her navigate a particularly tricky overhang at Garden of the Gods with the focused intensity of a surgeon, her movements precise and confident as she found holds I couldn't even see from below. What started as appreciation for her technical skills had gradually transformed into something deeper as I witnessed her genuine passion for the mountains, her ability to find beauty in the geological formations I studied professionally, and her infectious enthusiasm for sharing these experiences with someone who understood the science behind the scenery. The moment felt perfect when I finally gathered courage to tell her during sunset at Garden of the Gods, golden light painting the towering red formations around us as other climbers packed up their gear and headed home, leaving us alone with the ancient sandstone and the weight of everything I'd been carrying for months. I'd rehearsed the words for weeks, choosing this spot because it was where we'd shared our first climb together, where she'd patiently taught me to trust the rock and my equipment, where she'd celebrated my first successful lead climb with genuine excitement that made me feel like I'd accomplished something truly significant. Instead of the awkward fumbling I'd imagined, my confession came out clear and honest about how our climbing partnership had evolved into something deeper for me, how her passion for the mountains perfectly complemented my geological fascination with the ancient stories written in stone, how I'd started looking forward to our climbing sessions as the best part of each week. Her response was everything I'd hoped it wouldn't be, yet exactly what I should have expected from someone as thoughtful and experienced as Amber had proven herself to be over our 2 years together. She explained gently but firmly how she'd watched too many climbing partnerships dissolve into bitter drama when romance failed, how the absolute trust required for life-and-death situations on technical routes couldn't survive the emotional complexity and potential resentment of failed romantic relationships. Her reasoning was sound, logical, and completely devastating because I couldn't argue with any of it without sounding like I was minimizing the very real risks she'd witnessed firsthand in the climbing community. I accepted her decision with outward grace, thanking her for our friendship and promising that nothing would change between us, even as I felt something fundamental crack inside my chest like a poorly placed protection point suddenly bearing unexpected weight. That night, alone in my Denver apartment surrounded by climbing magazines and route guides, we'd spent hours planning together, staring at photos of peaks we'd conquered side by side. I realized that continuing our weekly adventures would be emotional torture disguised as friendship. I opened my laptop and began researching geological positions as far from Colorado's red rocks as possible, knowing that proximity to what I couldn't have would slowly destroy me from the inside, turning every shared climb into a reminder of rejection. I implemented a careful withdrawal strategy over the following weeks, declining Amber's climbing invitations with believable excuses about equipment certification courses and family obligations back in Kansas. The lies came easier than I'd expected, each fabricated conflict with our usual climbing schedule buying me time to process the rejection while maintaining the facade that nothing had fundamentally changed between us. During group gatherings at our usual climbing gym, I positioned myself strategically to avoid the deep conversations we'd always gravitated toward, keeping interactions surface level and friendly while my chest tightened every time she laughed at someone else's jokes with the same enthusiasm she'd once reserved for our private moments on remote cliff faces. I researched geological survey positions across the Pacific Northwest with the methodical precision I usually applied to route planning, leveraging my 5 years of experience in mineral analysis and cave mapping to identify opportunities that would utilize my skills while providing the geographic distance I desperately needed. My approach to distancing myself felt like dismantling complex geological equipment after a field expedition, each step careful and deliberate to avoid damage while ensuring nothing essential got left behind or broken in the process. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was applying the same systematic thinking that had made me a competent climbing partner to the task of extracting myself from her life as cleanly as possible. Within 3 weeks of that sunset conversation at Garden of the Gods, I'd secured interviews with volcanic monitoring stations and earthquake research facilities scattered from Washington state to northern Alaska, each position offering the kind of challenging fieldwork and intellectual stimulation that had initially drawn me to geology. The applications felt like crafting protection placements on a difficult route, each one carefully positioned to support the weight of my decision to rebuild my life somewhere Amber's presence couldn't undermine my emotional stability. I told myself this was strategic retreat rather than cowardly flight, though the distinction mattered less than the growing sense of relief I felt with each mile of theoretical distance I put between myself and the climbing routes we'd shared. My supervisor noticed my sudden interest in remote postings and assumed I was finally ready for the kind of challenging assignments that could advance my career, having no idea that professional advancement was simply a convenient byproduct of my need to escape the emotional minefield that Colorado had become. The hardest part was maintaining normal interactions during our final group climbing sessions, pretending enthusiasm for route discussions while internally calculating how many weeks remained until I could disappear from her world without seeming like I was running away from her rejection. I accepted the senior volcanologist position with the Alaska Volcano Observatory in Anchorage, working on eruption prediction systems for remote volcanic islands scattered across the Aleutian chain. The job offered everything I needed professionally and personally: challenging research opportunities, complete geographic isolation from Colorado's climbing scene, and the kind of technical work that would demand my full attention during the healing process ahead. At my farewell gathering at our favorite climbing gear shop, surrounded by route maps and equipment that had defined my social life for years, Amber presented me with a hand-carved ice axe handle featuring the precise coordinates of our first climb together etched into the polished wood with remarkable craftsmanship. The gesture was thoughtful and devastating in equal measure, a tangible reminder of what we'd shared that I'd have to carry with me into my new life whether I wanted to or not. I thanked her genuinely while internally calculating how quickly I could pack the gift away once I reached Alaska, knowing that daily reminders of our climbing partnership would sabotage any attempt at moving forward emotionally. The drive to Alaska felt surreal and transformative, leaving behind Colorado's familiar red rocks for an increasingly alien landscape of snow-capped peaks and glacial valleys that stretched endlessly toward horizons I'd only seen in geological textbooks. I packed away all tangible reminders of our climbing adventures with methodical precision, storing route maps and summit photos in boxes that I sealed and labeled with dates, vowing not to open them until enough time had passed for the memories to lose their emotional charge. My new role monitoring volcanic activity across the Aleutian Islands provided exactly the intellectual challenge and geographic isolation I'd been seeking, requiring me to learn entirely new systems for predicting eruptions and assessing hazards in one of the world's most volcanically active regions. The work demanded absolute focus and offered genuine purpose, studying geological processes that could affect thousands of lives while contributing to scientific understanding of volcanic systems in ways that my previous mineral analysis work had never approached. Each day brought new data from remote monitoring stations, seismic readings from volcanoes with names I was still learning to pronounce, and the satisfying challenge of interpreting geological processes happening in real time across vast distances. The contrast between my old life of weekend climbing adventures and this new existence of serious scientific work felt like stepping from amateur geology into professional relevance, though I knew the career advancement was simply a fortunate side effect of my need to rebuild my identity somewhere Amber's memory couldn't undermine my progress. I rebuilt my life in Alaska by joining the Anchorage Mountaineering Club and volunteering for glacier research expeditions instead of pursuing recreational climbing that would remind me of what I'd lost. The transition from technical rock climbing to glacial mountaineering felt symbolic and practical, requiring me to learn entirely new skills while engaging with Alaska's unique landscape in ways that had no connection to my Colorado memories with Amber. My challenging work designing seismic monitoring networks for remote volcanic sites provided the intellectual fulfillment I'd never experienced during my years of basic mineral analysis, each project demanding creative problem-solving and technical expertise that pushed my geological knowledge in directions I hadn't known existed. At an Arctic research symposium focused on climate change impacts, I met Nova, a glaciologist studying ice sheet dynamics and the accelerating effects of warming temperatures on polar ecosystems throughout the Arctic region. Our relationship developed naturally through shared winter camping expeditions to collect ice core samples and late-night aurora photography sessions where we discussed the intersection of volcanic activity and glacial behavior with genuine scientific enthusiasm. Unlike my friendship with Amber, which had revolved around weekend climbing adventures punctuated by personal conversations about relationships and career frustrations, Nova and I connected through our shared fascination with geological processes and climate science, spending hours analyzing ice core data and debating theories about volcanic ash impacts on glacial formation. She possessed the same methodical approach to research that I appreciated in my own work, but applied it to understanding ice dynamics rather than seismic activity, creating a professional compatibility that felt both intellectually stimulating and emotionally satisfying. The contrast between my old relationship dynamic and this new connection was remarkable, where Amber had tolerated my geological interests as quirky personality traits. Nova genuinely shared my passion for understanding Earth's complex systems and contributed insights that enhanced my own research projects. Our conversations flowed naturally from discussing permafrost research techniques to planning joint expeditions where her glaciological expertise could complement my volcanic monitoring work, creating opportunities for collaborative research that neither of us could accomplish independently. I found myself looking forward to our field work together with the same anticipation I'd once reserved for climbing sessions with Amber, but this time the excitement stemmed from intellectual partnership rather than romantic longing disguised as friendship. The gradual realization that I was building something healthier and more sustainable with Nova helped me understand how much emotional energy I'd wasted trying to transform a climbing friendship into something it was never meant to become. My expertise in volcanic hazard assessment led to rapid promotions and consulting opportunities across the Pacific Ring of Fire, from monitoring active volcanoes in Russia's Kamchatka Peninsula to assessing eruption risks for communities in New Zealand's volcanic zones. Meanwhile, through mutual friends and social media glimpses, I learned that Amber's life had stagnated in disappointing ways, with a series of failed relationships and mounting frustration at the same geological consulting firm in Denver where she'd remained for 3 years without advancement. The contrast between our divergent paths became starkly evident as I presented research findings at international conferences while she posted increasingly bitter updates from the same Colorado climbing spots we'd once shared, her Instagram stories revealing a pattern of weekend adventures that had lost their spark and professional dissatisfaction that seemed to deepen with each passing month. Through our climbing community's inevitable gossip network, I discovered that Amber had developed an obsessive interest in monitoring my career progression, regularly asking detailed questions about my work assignments and personal life during group gatherings at the Denver climbing gym. She'd begun stalking my professional social media posts about volcanic fieldwork and Northern Lights photography with Nova, commenting with forced enthusiasm on achievements that clearly reminded her of opportunities she'd never pursued herself. The reports from mutual friends painted a picture of someone increasingly fixated on comparing her static situation to my expanding horizons, asking pointed questions about my salary, my research publications, and whether I'd found someone special in Alaska. I felt a mixture of satisfaction and genuine sympathy as I realized that her rejection, intended to preserve a valuable friendship, had inadvertently motivated me toward professional success and personal fulfillment that far exceeded anything I might have achieved while remaining emotionally anchored to our climbing partnership in Colorado. The irony wasn't lost on me that distancing myself from what I'd thought I wanted most had opened doors to opportunities I'd never imagined possible, while Amber remained trapped in the same patterns that had made her reject the possibility of deeper connection in the first place. Nova found these reports fascinating from an anthropological perspective, observing how Amber's surveillance behavior revealed classic signs of retroactive regret and social comparison anxiety that often emerged when people realized they dismissed opportunities for growth in favor of maintaining comfortable but limiting status quo arrangements. Amber engineered what she called a research collaboration opportunity in Alaska, supposedly investigating earthquake risks for her Denver geological consulting firm but actually attempting to assess my life situation and determine whether reconciliation might be possible. The transparent nature of her mission became obvious when she scheduled meetings during my busiest research season and insisted on staying an extra week beyond what any legitimate consulting work would require, clearly hoping for extended personal contact that would allow her to gauge my emotional availability. During our forced coffee meeting in downtown Anchorage, surrounded by the familiar geological maps and seismic data that had once formed the foundation of our shared interests, I kept the conversations strictly professional while frequently mentioning NOVA and our collaborative research on glacial volcanic interactions throughout the Arctic region. She repeatedly tried steering our discussion toward nostalgic memories of our climbing adventures in Rocky Mountain National Park, referencing specific routes we'd conquered together and moments of shared triumph that she clearly hoped would rekindle emotional connection, but I consistently redirected every conversational attempt back to work topics and current research projects that excluded any reference to our personal history. The contrast between her desperate attempts at emotional manipulation and my calm focus on professional matters created an awkward tension that seemed to frustrate her more with each passing hour, as she realized that the person who had once hung on her every word about climbing techniques and route planning had evolved into someone whose primary interests lay far beyond anything we'd previously shared. After her return to Colorado, she began sending lengthy text messages filled with specific memories from our climbing partnership and increasingly obvious hints that she might have made a terrible mistake in rejecting my romantic feelings 2 years earlier, each message more desperate than the last as she apparently realized that her window of opportunity was rapidly closing. I shared these messages with Nova, who analyzed them with the same scientific detachment she applied to studying ice core samples, identifying clear patterns of retroactive jealousy and manipulation tactics commonly employed by people who realized they dismissed valuable opportunities in favor of maintaining comfortable but limiting arrangements that ultimately led to stagnation and regret. The psychological insight Nova provided helped me understand that Amber's sudden interest in reconnecting had nothing to do with genuine romantic feelings toward me and everything to do with her growing awareness that she'd remained professionally and personally static while I'd evolved into someone whose life represented everything she'd convinced herself she didn't want but now desperately envied. On my birthday, Amber sent a carefully crafted message referencing our shared memory of surviving an unexpected blizzard during a winter climb in the Rockies, complete with details about the emergency shelter we'd built and how that experience had supposedly deepened our bond beyond ordinary friendship. The same morning, Nova and I browsed engagement rings at a specialty jeweler in Anchorage, examining unique designs featuring meteorite inlays and glacier blue sapphires that perfectly captured the intersection of our geological interests and Arctic environment. When I posted an Instagram story of our intertwined hands over the ring display case, along with a casual caption about exploring jewelry options for a special someone, Amber's response was immediate and devastating in its desperation. She left increasingly frantic voicemails throughout the day confessing that she'd made a terrible mistake years earlier in prioritizing friendship over potential romance, claiming that seeing my success in Alaska had made her realize I was exactly the kind of partner she'd always needed but had been too afraid to risk losing through romantic complications. I blocked her number and social media accounts that evening, recognizing that her sudden romantic interest coincided suspiciously with my career advancement and apparent happiness with someone else, making it clear that her feelings were rooted in competitive jealousy rather than genuine affection. The proposal happened during the Aurora Borealis at Chugach State Park, with the northern lights dancing overhead in brilliant green curtains while snow-covered peaks surrounded us in a natural cathedral that dwarfed any indoor wedding venue we could have imagined. Nova's scientific enthusiasm for the rare aurora display combined with her emotional joy at the proposal created a perfect moment that felt both personally significant and professionally relevant to our shared research interests, as we'd actually planned the timing around optimal aurora viewing conditions she'd predicted through her climate data analysis. Our engagement announcement featured the AuroraLit proposal photo alongside a joint research publication about volcanic ash impacts on glacial formation, symbolizing how our personal and professional lives had seamlessly integrated in ways that enhanced both aspects. The response from our Arctic research community was overwhelmingly enthusiastic, with colleagues from multiple universities and research stations celebrating both our engagement and our collaborative scientific achievements. Meanwhile, according to mutual friends from the climbing community, Amber apparently created multiple fake social media accounts to monitor our happiness from afar, her surveillance behavior becoming increasingly obsessive as she realized that the life she'd rejected had transformed into something far more substantial and meaningful than anything she'd built for herself in Colorado.